Hi, Charles and Sarah. I think it's just you two that are online, and then the three of us here in the chambers. I'll kick off the meeting if you're ready over there.
Sure, that's the whole group today?
It's just the five of us. Nice and personal.
Okay.
Mm. Okay. So yeah, welcome to the Squamish Nation Traditional Territory. This is for the advisory design panel held today on Thursday, June the 20th, 24 at 2 p.m. The first item would be the option of agenda. Staff recommends that the June 20th, 2024 advisory design panel agenda be adopted. Can I get a motion for people to adopt? Yep. Okay. Both Charles and Sarah. Seconded by Sarah. And the next item would be going straight into the committee minutes, which is advisory design panel minutes, May the 16th. Staff's recommendation is that the advisory design panel minutes dated May the 16th be adopted. Can we get a motion for that? Yeah, both Charles and seconded by Sarah. So moving on to the business items, it's today is the accessory dwelling unit design competition. This will be presented to you and described by Matt Gunn, planner here at District of Squamish. Over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Luke. My name is Matt Gunn, as Luke pointed out. I'm a planner here at the District of Squamish, and I am coordinating this Squamish accessory dwelling unit design competition. I think the ADP members are aware of the background, but I will just provide a quick overview for anybody who's watching. This competition is one of the actions that was outlined in the Squamish Housing Action Plan overview and has been funded by the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation Accelerator Fund, a federal grant program that was awarded to us in January 2024. The purpose of the design competition is to raise awareness around the benefits of ADUs as one way to address Squamish's housing shortage and encourage housing variety and affordability. We received 41 designs across 3 categories. The building department checked the designs against contest parameters, zoning, and building code requirements, and 25 designs met those requirements. The ADP members were asked to conduct an initial review of those 25 entries and select 4 from each category for inclusion in a shortlist. Those are the shortlisted designs are what we're going to be discussing today. Just moving forward, the intention of the judging is to assess each of the designs against 5 criteria. Those criteria are aesthetics, innovation and creativity, affordability and cost effectiveness, sustainability and resilience, and accessibility and universal design. Each of those categories is intended to get a score out of 20, and then those totals will be summed up for a score out of 100 for the designs. The intention today is to give ADP members a chance to talk about each of the designs and share elements that they like about each of the designs. We're not going to try and come to a conclusion about the scoring for any of the designs today. This is just an opportunity to discuss the designs and highlight to other ADP members things that characteristics that you appreciate or comments you have about each of the designs. I had intended to give a chance to talk about each of the designs, of which we have 12, with 5 members of ADP here. It won't take as much time as probably was anticipated to get through each of the designs, and so we may not take the full allocated 2 hours for this discussion, but we may progress through more rapidly. But we'll just see how it goes. We have lots of time to talk about each of the designs. Following this discussion, the intention is that ADP members will, over the next 4 days, fill in this form, which is linked from the staff report. If you will just go for each of the designs, give a score out of 20 for each category. It'll sum up the scores for the 12 designs, and then email that to me. I will take those forms and bring them all together, and we'll get a total score across all of the participating ADP members to rank the designs in each category and choose the winners. So without further ado, we will start going through our short list. There are 3 categories: carriage house, elevated cottage. Oh, that's 308 in the front yard ADU. I didn't get a 308. I think, did you guys get 308? Oh, just wait here. What does 308 look like? The numbers aren't actually on the designs. Just a second here. Give me 1 second. I'll see if maybe there's 2 copies. Oh,
I'm doing
It's
quick
this
math
one.
in my head here. It's there's 12 designs, there's 5 of us. If we're gonna run 2 hours on this, it gives us 2 minutes apiece to talk about each of these items.
yeah, I know it's not a lot of time, but it's twice the time I had originally thought of for each design. We'll see how it goes. It does provide a limited amount of time to discuss each one, but yeah, if you could print 4 of the 308s. Yeah, so it's not a lot of time, but it gives a chance for people to share their comments on it. And if some take less time and some take more, maybe it'll work out. But let's see how it goes. First time trying this format, and maybe there's if we come up with a better way along the way, we can discuss shifting the process. But anyway, there are 3 categories: carriage house, elevated cottage, and front yard ADU. And without further ado, let's get into the first one, which is 103, the Thuja. And I am going to pass it off. I imagine we'll go one at a time around, and I had intended we would just go around the circle, but if anybody wants to jump in and start, we can let them get going. Otherwise, I'll turn it over, maybe the first person on my right, maybe, or my left. John, would you like to start out, make any comments about this guy?
All right. Yeah, I mean, I thought it was an attractive package that they put together. So it was based on the information provided in the drawings, it was relatively easy to tell what they were proposing. I thought, like the cost to me seems to be very affordable. I don't know if it's realistic or not, but if it's realistic, that's fantastic to have an attractive looking building with, constructed with quality material for the estimated like 250,000 hard costs. And then I thought, it's fairly unobtrusive, attractive design for the building. It seemed like an efficient use of space. And so that's about all I have to say about it, I think.
Perfect, thanks. Actually, one thing I should just say is I come up with this idea that we would each take turn commenting, but I should put it out there that if anybody feels like they'd have a different format where people just ping pong or put comments if they want to, but don't feel like putting it on the spot, I'm happy to do that way as well. So why don't we do this first one and then see if people want to continue using that format moving forward, and if not, we can shift.
Okay.
All right. Who will be our normal second if we go in a circle? I can't see who's on the screen. All right. Okay, sure. That sounds perfect.
Sorry, can you just get the microphone a bit closer because it's hard to hear you?
I didn't have it turned on. Sorry, I
Oh,
apologize,
that
guys.
helps.
I'm a noob to in person here. Yeah, so I would say this one wasn't one of my first choices, but I really appreciate the idea of the standardized kit of parts, keeping the sizes in particular of the building components standard, available at Home Depot because we live in Squamish. Things are difficult to access if you're trying to build things here. So as much as possible, keeping in mind that the scale of these buildings are actually attuned to the scale of the building material is a really great consideration. I think the cost is pretty good as well. And that's something that I appreciate. Durability, important consideration. I found there to be something a little bit less efficient about the proposed floor plan, just in terms of the use of the space and the layout. Initially, I think that was did they have a more detailed floor plan? Yeah, that's right. I remember this one for that. I think. Excuse me while I skip to it. Yeah, I think there was something a little bit that I found to be could be made to be a bit more efficient in this layout with the use of space, the location of the entry and the kitchen, and it would be great to see a little bit more storage as well. So those were kind of the downfalls that I saw in this one, because whenever there's sort of an irregular shape, it tends to add cost. So I think it could get a little bit more efficient as well. Those are my high level comments about this one so far. I think that was it.
Perfect. Thank you.
Keep it concise.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, start by saying I think the aesthetics sort of fits well in like the modern Squamish home that seems to be appearing in a lot of places. I can see this fitting in multiple neighborhoods. I think the attention to the detail, like the general detail and layouts is appreciated. As you can see with the lap siding and the battens, I can see the ability to be able to revise certain bits and customize the elements easily. I would also echo the last comments regarding the floor plan. I think the floor plan could be made a little bit more efficient. I find some of the way the spaces are laid out to be, especially when you're working with really small areas like this, every inch or every square inch counts. There's a couple of inefficiencies around the doors and some areas that could benefit from a little bit more space as well. I do find the construction cost, although the total sounds almost right, the cost per square foot might be a little low for current pricing in Squamish. But if you maybe to make it in a standard kit of parts, I can see how that cost might be able to come down. I feel like this project could benefit from further exploration in detail design, especially around the soffits. And sorry, I'm skipping through this so quickly. But other than that, I actually think it's a relatively good project.
Thank you. Who from online would like to go?
I'll go.
Great, thank you.
So yeah, I mean, I think that this is quite, you know, it's a relatively attractive building that would fit into a lot of different neighborhoods without competing too much. So, you know, I'm satisfied with that. In terms of the layout and what they say they're doing for accessibility, I appreciate and think that it's quite a good use of space, tucking away the lift to the balcony. I really like that. However, they do claim to meet the 2024 accessibility guidelines or adaptability guidelines for the washroom, and they do not. So it doesn't currently provide enough space to transfer into the shower because you're facing it. So that would need to be revised. And then what else? What other comments have I got here? I gave them, you know, decent score for innovation and sustainability. But I also then questioned, again, you know, what sort of privacy would exist between, you know, the balcony and the space beneath the balcony, which looks fantastic. But if it's not, you know, close family members with whomever is living in the main house, you know, it doesn't provide that privacy. So that would be my my main comments. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Charles, do you want to add any comments?
Yeah, I believe that I wouldn't. I thought that this was, you know, the best, most worked out, most believable of the schemes. It's it's buildable and it works, and it looks, fairly nice. It's not, it's not very original. I mean, and that's part of, I think, what, why it's very believable as we look at if you look at the assemblies for the exterior wall, it's very conventional construction. And but that there's a certain cost associated with that. I do think that the estimate's probably a little bit on the low side, and it's just, this isn't being particularly innovative, but but it does the job in terms of what they were setting out to do here.
Great, thanks. Any other comments on that, Charles, or is that conclude your input on this one?
Yeah, no, that's all.
Great. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, maybe before we move on to the next one, I'll check in with ADP members and see if we want to continue with this format or if we'd want to go with a more unstructured where people can add comments if they want, but not if they don't. Do you want to continue going one by one, or thoughts? Would you like to just add if you have comments and not if you don't?
Yeah, I find when you go one by one, it's a little easier when you have a hybrid meeting so that we aren't just jumping on top of each other.
Good call.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Well, we'll go continue one by one. I just didn't want to put anybody on the spot where they felt they had to if they didn't feel like they had comments. But if everybody's happy with that, Sarah and Charles, does that work for you?
Yep.
Great. All right. Then we will move on to the next one, which is 106. So it looks like this for those of you in-house. Should we continue with the same order, or should we go back and forth, or choose a new person to start? Maybe I'll choose a new person to start each time. Do you want to, Luke, would you like to go first this time, or?
Yeah, I can take the charge. I found I appreciated how this one was like somewhat different to the other submissions. However, I do struggle with the scale of it, and that it's a small scale building, but there's so much rock and blank wall proposed that it felt somewhat monolithic. Like I do appreciate the materials, but I think the way that they've been used wasn't necessarily employed in the best strategy, and it could benefit from a little more attention to detailing of the overall facade and elevations. In terms of like the floor plate, I kind of somewhat appreciate the fact that there's a large amount of parking proposed in here, and that the fact that the actual open space is being brought to the upper level. I do feel that like there's almost so much open space, which is great, that it could almost benefit from a little bit more livable area. Especially when you're entering and you're coming into this space, there's not a lot of area for being able to throw all of your gear away, and having that storage down on the ground plane is tricky. I do question the accessible portions of the lift and how that would work with the 3-foot wide area moving around there, but I'll definitely let Sarah speak to that one. I apologize, but I might have missed the pricing. Oh, no, I did miss it. There it is. Yeah, I think given the fact that there's stone proposed around this whole thing, those prices are a little bit low. And then the fact that it's the garage with ICF forming, also, yeah, a little on the low side, is a little optimistic for me. But that's
Thank you, Luke. Who wants to go next in-house? All right, thank you.
May I ask a question before we go a lot further, just to clarify, in terms of the intent for these designs, the idea that I understand is that there'll be sort of a series of like almost like pre-approved templates. And if you stick sort of close to the template when you apply, it's a fast track process. But how close to those floor plans, like how is it exactly like that? How much leeway do you have from it? Because I don't want to go too far into talking about the floor plans if they don't really matter. I guess that's the question.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. First off, we're using the term pre-reviewed as opposed to pre-approved, mainly because many of the criteria that our building or plan checkers have to evaluate with each submission are site specific. Things like FCL and flood proofing. So we can't say pre-approved. There's a fair bit that does need to be checked for each one. What we've said is that submissions that are made will go into a priority sequence ahead of other ADUs and suites. So they'll be the priority for review, and that we will look at reduction in fees in the future, although we haven't done that at this point. And yeah, that's a question that came up, like how much variance are we going to support and still keep in that category? I think we'll be fairly lenient because much of the evaluation does, there's still quite a bit that's related to the site. So there's going to be time put in anyway. But I think we're going to have to evaluate that. Like strictly speaking, if there's a lot of variance, then we can just say, hey, this doesn't align. And we'll probably have to discuss with our plan checkers to see how much additional work each one is taking. So I don't have a clear answer on that, but I think we'll try to be as lenient as possible, but do reserve the right to hold if there's enough variance.
Okay, that's great. That answers my question. Thanks.
Perfect. Thanks.
I will comment on the floor plans of this one a little bit too. Just following up on Luke's comments, yeah, I did find that I found it optimistic, the costs associated with the construction for this one, especially CLT. That one's problematic for me because I know from experience that the suppliers of mass timber are so reluctant to supply small quantities of mass timber for projects. They just don't have the time in their schedule or the capacity. It tends to be something that we have a really hard time on small projects. Not impossible, but if we're going to make it something that is readily accessible to most, it's going to be a sticking point, I think. So that's just the one. And also the stone cladding as well. I would agree that it's quite nice. Maybe it's just indicative and not something that, we should be focusing too much on. But again, it's all just added cost and something where we're trying to really make these places affordable for people because the big barrier right now is access. So if we can trim it down and be really innovative in our approach and trim the fat off of these things, then I think it's going to make it more desirable. And I would add to that, I think, again, when I saw this first, I thought, oh, wow, that's great to have access to such a nice big outdoor space. Although I do know from having experience living in tight quarters in Vancouver, that outdoor space gets used for your storage. You try to convert it, and City of Vancouver is always constantly trying to find ways to prevent people from putting roofs on these things and enclosing them and making them livable space. Anyone who's dealt with the issue of enclosed balconies will know what I'm talking about. So I think that will be a constant struggle for the district, is trying to find a way that people aren't going to just enclose it and use it for FSR if it's not something that you want to allow people to do. And in terms of, I didn't have much to say in terms of siting because I find the carriage house ones all have a very sort of similar relationship to the house and the laneways. So in terms of form and character on the lot, it kind of, it looks like a carriage house above a garage. It could benefit from more windows, but I appreciate that there's a trade-off there in terms of cost and energy efficiency. So I'd say that's my nutshell comments for this one.
Thank you so much. I will turn over to John.
Thanks, Matt. This one, I felt like the exterior looks both busy and like it has both elements that are too busy and too blank. Like it was a weird contrast to have both of those things in the same structure. So I did kind of struggle with that, just like visual appeal of it. I think part of that is, maybe the rock cladding on stone cladding on such a small building is maybe a little out of place. Again, like I like this idea of their prefabricated wood system. That was appealing. That idea of, we're like doing construction in a tight place. You don't have a lot of room in this type of infill for coming and going and the construction activities. So that idea of being able to drop all the materials on site and assemble it quickly, that's really appealing. So high marks for that. Again, yeah, I mean, I think we're going to run into this with a lot of this issue around storage. If this is a true 1-bedroom plus den, maybe that den becomes a good location for storage. On the other hand, you might see people needing to use that den as a 2nd bedroom or an office. And in that case, there isn't a lot of storage space. So we in Whistler have the same issue with balconies getting used for storage instead of other things. And we also have the balcony conversions. That's an ongoing challenge. So yeah, but otherwise, I really appreciate the effort, and I like this the construction system that they're working with. I like that as a concept.
Thank you, John. I'll move to online. Sarah, would you like to start?
Sure. I concur with everybody. I mean, I think that the rock is overkill. I kind of mostly hate it. In terms of the elevator, I mean, it doesn't meet the CSA requirements. It is a bit tight, but I do like that it's screened and, not obvious that the elevator is there. I don't mind the layout inside, but visually on the outside, I really don't like this building. It does meet the requirements in the washroom, so that's great. And I like that there's, a movable island. I, question whether or not, how adaptable it will be, or if there's an opportunity for it actually with any of these units to have, kind of movable cupboards or fold away doors beneath sinks so that you would be able to wheel under them would be fantastic, whether or not that's able to be built in. I like the building system being these prefab panels. I think that's great. I just find the rock is too much, and visually it's just too much. If you could take away the outside and sort of configure it, that would be better. So that's my comments.
Great. Thank you very much, Sarah. And I'll turn to Charles for the last comments.
Okay. On the previous scheme, I complained a little bit about what I thought was, lack of innovation in terms of the construction technology. And on that one, I'm happy to see, an intent of being kind of innovative. But in the execution of this, it's extremely awkward and unrealistic, right? I mean, it's extremely expensive construction, and the designer here have created unnecessary constraints for themselves. The modularity that they are pursuing here is extremely chunky and not very flexible, and leads to a plan that's overall kind of not very efficient. I don't think that this is obviously not a really kind of thought out concept. So I don't think it really works.
Okay. Is that the conclusion for you, Charles?
Yeah, no, I don't like this one.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you very much. Moving forward, we'll now move to, it is 107, which is the Peekaboo Lookout. I think if we're starting in-house, Beth, it'll be your chance to start.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, this one, I don't remember my my technical comments on this one. I got a bit romanced by the aesthetic right off the bat and wondered if that would really be affordable. Yeah, but again, yeah, I do like initially from like an aesthetic perspective, I like that it's pushing forward what looks like a cedar cladding. Combustibility and proximity to the other houses might be an issue with that, sadly. Unless of course you kind of go with a really expensive flame retardant coating, which kind of defeats the purpose of using what looks to be like cedar cladding. I love it. That idea again of using a wood cladding material, because one of the things that's so special about Squamish is the vernacular and using that material. And a lot of times we use the fake material because of the combustibility and fireproofing issues, but it's just so nice to see the real thing every now and then, because that's the real sort of natural resource industry that we knew back in the day. I appreciate that this had a component of modular building as well. Again, I definitely agree with Charles, because I love to see the innovation in the building typology, but I also recognize that Squamish is a bit slow to catch up in building innovation techniques for small scale stuff. I think it's really good at the large scale. I think the trades are really busy working on projects that have innovative structural and thermal envelope detailing. At the small scale, I know I have friends who are really struggling to get people to work on smaller projects who won't step, or they're so reluctant to step out of the box. I know that's not necessarily a reason to kick things out the door, because the construction industry needs to come up to speed too. And if they need to come up to speed, this is going to be a good impetus for them. But it's nice to see a balance of something that's kind of like familiar in terms of the wall construction and achievable. And, I think adding cranes to the mix definitely makes things a little bit more costly and sort of requires specialty people to build it. So that kind of thing is just the thing I have in the back of my mind in terms of like moving fast, getting, making use of like the skilled labor base here that exists right now, and putting these things up with sort of known techniques and access to the materials at local kind of, I guess, suppliers. So like one of those things here I look at right now, this interior rendering is gorgeous. Look at that beautiful clear story window. That clear story window is custom, and it is going to cost a fortune, and I still love it. So it pains me to say that. But I think like still, the scale seems quite appropriate. The way it's sitting on site, the way that it relates to the garage, the way that it's kind of got like a quiet design aesthetic that it's putting forward, just focusing on sort of like the local materials. I like all those aspects of this project. And I didn't really look at the costing, so I can't comment on it right now, but I do also recall appreciating the layout of this particular one too. I thought it was quite unique, the way that they stacked the storage on either sides of the washroom. The washroom looks like it could be a bit of a challenge from an accessibility point of view, but I will certainly let Sarah speak to that one as well. And I think that's it for me. Yeah, mouthful.
Great. Thank you so much, Beth. I'll stay in-house and look to John to go next.
Thanks, Matt. So same first impressions. I'm like totally a sucker for wood cladding, and the images in the package were very attractive. So yeah, totally like the shape and the cladding, choice of cladding material. I appreciate the proposed modular component construction. So again, this idea of being able to assemble it quickly when we're thinking, this is really helpful for this really tight infill type of construction. Again, it seems like a reasonable per square foot cost, if that's realistic or not, but appreciate that. And I did, yeah, the floor plan seemed nice. I thought that the indoor-outdoor space, that was a really nice relationship between the living space inside and the generous deck on the outside. And I thought they seem to do a really nice job of balancing light, like the fenestration, and privacy here. So that's obviously a challenge for this type of building, and I thought this was sensitive in that way.
Great. Thank you, John. And I'll move to Luke.
Yeah, I think romanticized is a really great point, and there's some really great points mentioned by the other colleagues here. And yeah, I think it's a really great use of form to really articulate the building. I can imagine it sitting well in any multiple neighborhoods, but it really characterizes the. I don't want to use the word vernacular because Squamish struggles to have one, but I can see that fitting in multiple neighborhoods and sitting in quite well, but while also taking in quite lots of light and having nice private spaces. I actually really enjoy the effort made to innovate the floor plan, the use of storage and nooks and crannies to be able to tuck things away while also creating somewhat of a minimalist interior, which it kind of rings true with me. There are, I think it's difficult to pick on these sometimes, and expect them to be perfect, because there's areas in this which can be developed, and I think it's owed to this, such as the clerestory window. I mean, yeah, I agree it's custom and it's expensive, but maybe there's ways to value engineer it by putting more mullions in and things like that as it gets developed. It would have been nice to see the option for a proposed add-on for elevators to make it accessible. I feel where there could be a bit more attention paid would be the lower level. Although I do enjoy the cleanness of the streetscape and how the garage door comes down and the building overlaps to give it coverage. There's so much consideration given to this. It just could have benefited maybe from a little more thought in the garage. Maybe there's more opportunity for the storage there as well. But I'm just getting picky. The costing, there wasn't a lot of detail on that. They're just saying $5,000 per finished meter squared, with the wooden battens and the detailing for this. I think it would be quite tricky, but with value engineering, you might be able to get closer to that. Yeah, I think everyone else covered all the other points.
Great. Thank you, Luke. I'll move to online, and I think Sarah went first online last time, so maybe we'll stick with Charles.
Sorry, okay. I really love this scheme. To me, there's a great understanding of scale here, where the complexity of the form is just right for the size of building, and it's beautifully detailed. I think this is a really believable example of something that could realistically be flat packed and built modular in an assembly line and delivered in the proper quantities, delivered at a substantial savings cost wise. And I'm really impressed with the level of attention evident in the floor plan to getting every little bit of efficiency and little bits of storage and getting the sizes and the proportions of the spaces right. It's very livable, floor plan, just really, really nice. Yeah, I mean, the wood cladding, I don't know how much of a, realistically, how much of that is a real problem here. I think, and if this did end up being some other type of cladding, the volumetrics and the composition here with how these volumes are kind of carved out and the openings are punched through, it would work even if it was just if you did this out of just flat fiber cement panel, it would still look great. Yeah, I think to me, this one's a real winner, an example of how this kind of problem should be approached.
Great. Oh, sorry. I was waiting for the pause to see if that was the end. If there's something more to say, Charles, I apologize. Keep going. Okay. I'll assume that was it. Thank you, Charles. I'll move to Sarah then.
I agree with what's been said about this space. I think it's thoughtfully designed. I really appreciate the privacy that exists, that, you know, sitting in your space and not sort of being overlooked. But I did give them a big old 0 for their efforts with accessibility. You know, there could be potentially, if the stairs were slightly wider, you know, maybe a lift and the platform added where the bicycle is on the drawings right now, but the washroom is never going to be accessible. Having said that, I think that all of these buildings, you know, that we should ensure that there's backing in the walls for grab bars in the future, because people can still age and, you know, walk stairs, but it's stability in the bathroom that's often an issue. I thought the pricing was, you know, quite reasonable, and that this could fit in a number of neighborhoods while, you know, remaining distinct from other buildings. But yeah, overall, I mean, I do appreciate it, but I thought, you know, given the design brief of what was supposed to be presented, they could have at least, you know, spoken to, we're putting backing in the walls and in the washroom would have been a step, but just to ignore it felt a bit dismissive and you're not trying hard enough. So that's my only comments.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. Moving on, the next one is Bento, this guy, and I thought I'd just give heads up for those inside. In the office, I had printed out some copies, but I may not have made them super clear. So after Bento is going to be Suga. But anyway, Bento now. We've started on in-house for first comments for the last several. Charles or Sarah, would either of you like to be the first commenter for Bento?
Yeah,
Sure.
I wouldn't mind.
Go ahead then, Charles.
The I do like this scheme quite a lot. I like the almost kind of retro aesthetic of this as being, you know, a very pure mid-century modern with a lot of Japanese influence. This idea that it's a simple box, and you know, with this, you know, this very regular kind of pattern of glazing and mullions. I think it works well for the scale of building here. I'm sorry, I'm trying to bring up on my own screen the floor plans, because I recall you know, that I had a little bit of issues with some of the floor plans. What's the number on this one?
111.
It's 11. Okay, let me get that open here. Right. Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah. I think the way that the space is detailed and treated lends itself well to the scale of the project. It's reasonably efficient layout. I don't know how realistic those tiny little kind of bed length bedrooms are. Um, uh, um, yeah, I like them, but there's a part of me that, you know, that has a certain, you know, romantic nostalgia for, you know, the life of a monk, and this little, you know, house seems to lend itself well to that. But yeah, but those tiny little bedrooms, I think would be, you know, an issue for most people. Yeah.
Thank you. We'll stay online. Sarah, would you like to go next?
Sure. This actually was my favorite of them all. I like that it's simple, but then there's also the option of having different roof shapes depending on, you know, where you're placing this. I like the construction methods, that there's, you know, sort of a different piece if you're going to add the elevator aspect and remove one of the bedrooms, which then allows a larger bedroom. What else have I got in my notes here? One thing to note is that in some of these quote unquote adaptable units, is that if there's going to be a wheel-in shower that's placed in there immediately, is that the plumbing fixtures need to move from the end wall to the side wall so that it's not going to be, it's going to be reachable from a seated position. And additionally, you know, there would need to be a few more considerations. Like I think that all of these units should have wiring for visual fire alarms. You know, the washer dryer, like need to make sure that the electrical schematics are going to allow kind of a lower outlet if it's going to be a washer dryer combo. But otherwise, I do really like this. I like the placement of the windows in the kitchen and the light that comes in, and again, you know, a bit of privacy. So yeah, overall, I thought this was a great project. That's all my comments.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Moving in person, who wants to go first?
Yeah, I mean, if I can give points for how to lay out a sheet, these people really know what they're doing. It's very, very nice. I just want to commend the graphic. It's really, my architectural side is just really liking this. Anyway, no, it's a really nice floor plan. I really appreciate the consideration that's been put into its layout. I think that the stair access is quite successful, encompassing the bathroom. I enjoy that they have consciously made a choice to give less space to the bedroom and more space to the living, which are sacrifices that sometimes have to be made in these really small scale projects. I do understand, however, that makes it more difficult and it's contrary to adaptable requirements. I appreciate even the detailing, there's very minimal, but like in just the consideration given to the garage for one large parking space, but a smaller space for potentially bikes or other things that facilitate and react to the hobbies that people have in these spaces. I'm the only one thing I am slightly confused about is that there's so much consideration given to it that I wonder why, maybe I'm missing it, the stair hasn't been flipped west to east, which will give even more opportunities for storage. But potentially I'm missing something there. Maybe it's for a future elevator. I think this one, in terms of like the cost breakdown, is one of the most accurate I've seen out of the lot so far. So I would applaud that. And I can see it being able to be built in multiple different ways. Yeah, I think overall, I think it's actually a really great effort.
Thanks, Luke. Next, John, you want to take a stab at it?
Yes. Yeah. So like really attractive visuals. It's the package was really appealing. You know, this moody evening photo in front of the chief, like it looks awesome. I was like, oh yeah. And with the Jeep in there, like this is like for sure. I think like it's very simple, right? It's just a square, it's a box, you know, compared to some of the others with that have a lot more shape to them, sculptural elements. I guess it means it allows for that really efficient, easy floor plan. I guess it means though that it's missing outdoor space for the residents. But overall, yeah, I really like this one. And I thought they did a great job conceiving of it. I think that, you know, offering those the modules and the easy sort of conversion, depending on, you know, 1 versus 2 bedroom, being able to pick and choose other elements to customize it within that modular conception was super successful. So yeah, high marks.
Thank you, John. Beth?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have so much more that I can add. Everybody's said a lot of what I was going to say as well. I really like this one. Of course, the package was very well prepared. I really appreciate how efficient the layout and the use of materials is in this one. I love, again, the wrapping the stair, the loft storage. I really love that they've created a space in the garage that's kind of like a storage, it's dedicated storage space, but you can also put your car in it. That's impossible in Squamish. Like everybody leaves their cars out so they can have this bike shrine or like a place to put your skis. But this is kind of dedicated to spaces, and I really like the way that they've accomplished that. I appreciate that if you go further into the package, they've provided an expanded option, which allows you to have larger spaces, larger bedrooms, larger bathroom. I think that's a great. I love this that there's scalability built into it because there's going to be differing needs. There are like people who come to Squamish to be monks and just sleep, eat, and take your pick, climb, ski, kite surf, and they just need a small space. And there are people who need a little bit more space because maybe they've got like a family, a growing family, or maybe it's aging in place, and you can choose to kind of scale the size of the living space. So I think that's really wonderful. I love sort of the passive ventilation aspect of it. The fact that all the materials are kind of broken down into smaller increments makes it more easy to access materials locally and easier for to use trades that are not necessarily specialized in certain construction techniques, or even build it yourself if you're the homeowner, which is a really important thing to consider as well. Rainwater collection is another great consideration, and it just doesn't seem to me. It seems believable. It doesn't seem too complicated. It's tight to the principal dwelling, but a lot of these dwellings have generous side yard conditions, which is good as well. And sometimes people will make the choice to sort of sacrifice that backyard space if they get a building like this. And just one last thing, I did appreciate also, yeah, I think the rendering totally sells it, as you suggest, John, because it's like the materiality, the color, the texture, like it right away. It's just a modern approach to like the bevel cladding that you see like in the Highlands, that you see in Garibaldi Estates, and in Valley Cliff as well. So it's not over the top modern. It still kind of has a nod sort of to the local building culture, which I love.
Well, and like Charles mentioned, the retro appeal of it. It's like, yeah. So I think they did a really nice job.
And I look at it and I'm like, yep, those could be garage doors that you could source here and you don't have to get from Europe. Like all this stuff kind of is really important when you want to make it accessible to people and save costs, and just put standard off the shelf parts on it but use them in a creative way, in an efficient way. That's the way we're going to solve these problems, in my opinion. So that's my comments on that one.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, that concludes the carriage. No, yes, that does conclude the carriage house, I believe. Yes. We're now moving on to category 2, the backyard cottage. Part of the reason for including this category is because it seemed like one of the better opportunities for increasing the number of ADUs in the community. We see lots of backyards, area like Valley Cliff, where we haven't traditionally seen ADUs, in part because we previously required access for a vehicle, and we're removing that, being more flexible. So this is we think an opportunity to see more housing in places we haven't been seeing it. So let's start off with the first one, which is 2-3, which is the Tsuga. And I think, Sarah, you haven't started off a talk yet. Is that correct?
That's right. I haven't started.
Well, it's your turn.
Ooh, so overall, I thought that this was a relatively attractive building that could fit into a number of spaces. I did have, let me just get to floor plan here. Come on. Yeah, so I like the way that it looks. But again, I have some problems with the washroom layout because it's not providing enough space to easily transfer if you can't weight bear through your legs into that space. And again, it's got a number of, it's not a square layout. It's similar to their carriage house. I mean, overall, I think that it's not bad. The layout, you know, there has been some good considerations for sort of sustainability, I thought. I like that they've got a future ramp. I don't know. Hang on, let me just see if it's screened or not. Oh yeah, it's not. I don't particularly like the look of a ramp. I like it when it's sort of a bit more screened so that it's not kind of a glaring obvious, here's a big ramp. But otherwise, I think that you know, it's a decent project. That's all my comments.
Thank you, Sarah. Charles, can we go to you at this point?
Yeah, sure. I when I first opened up the entire collection of packages, it struck me immediately how it was clear that you had a certain number of individuals enthused about this competition, and they decided to make entries in multiple categories, right? But then it became a bit of a struggle of trying to be objective about each of the individual submissions without comparing them, right? But on the other hand, it's kind of interesting as well to look at the approach on the carriage house versus the elevated cottage, where they're clearly the same people working the problem and seeing how their solutions differ. This particular submission, I think, is very comparable to the carriage house submission, but I think not quite as successful, interestingly enough. It's still a good layout. It's very buildable, immediately buildable, and it's completely thought out. I mean, this, you could just go ahead and build this thing, right? And I think that would be it would be a good building, a good addition, to the neighborhoods where it goes in. It's yeah, yeah. I think it's good. It's highly competent, and it's believable. And we could just go ahead and say, yeah, anyone who wants one of these, go ahead. In that spirit of saying these are going to be, kind of pre-reviewed. Clearly this one's ready to go.
Great. Thank you, Charles. Moving in person, which of you would like to jump? Looks like John is.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, I think, it seemed like there's appreciated the thought for standardized materials and simple and durable materials. I think it's a really easy design, like it would fit into unobtrusively into neighborhoods. So really appreciate the thought that went into that. Really thoughtful around the cost. I think it's pretty with these small buildings, like something that's simple allows for an efficient use of space. So I thought they did, reasonable job with that. I did notice that they have the Oilers and Canucks game on, I think, in the living room. So good little throwback to the playoffs a couple of weeks ago. And so, yeah, totally. Like I think similar thoughts to Charles, like easily see this working well and providing really comfortable living space in a fairly, simple, easy to build structure. So really competent and looks pretty reasonable across the board.
Thanks, John. In person, who else? Luke, you look like you're.
Yeah, oh, can you hear me? There we go. Yeah, I think I see that they've noted the typical existing conditions, and I do see this like the sort of appearance of this building fitting in quite well with, especially given the older Valley Cliff buildings. It seems to sort of have echoes of them in its arrangement and form. So I do see that fitting in relatively well in that way. Whether or not I subjectively believe that's the right move forwards. I do find the plan akin to like the not to compare like to the other submission that they had, but I do find the plan a little bit, especially with the cutouts. It does. I do find it would increase the construction cost, but it also doesn't seem to provide much efficiency to me when I'm looking at the plan. I feel that like there could be a little bit more consideration that was given to where that being, given that this is again a pre-reviewed plan which could be built everywhere. I think that the most efficient plan that could be arrived at would be more preferable. Having said that, I do see that this plan itself has more flexibility to be made accessible, given a couple of changes. One thing I thought could have been, I do also appreciate that there's been consideration given to firefighter access and the location of that front door. But I do believe that the building siting, I would have been nice to see a little bit more consideration given to that. I feel like it's just sort of tucked in the back corner, which maybe was a consideration to give to maximize open space, but I'm not sure if it was as successful as it could have been. That'll be my points.
Excellent, thank you. Beth, do you want to close us out on this one?
Sure thing. I think I agree with some of the comments that were said before, especially Charles off the bat saying it's hard not to compare the two schemes, because there's a lot of similarities as well in the floor plans, as Luke was saying as well. And I struggled with some of those inefficiencies as well. I just want to square this thing off and get rid of the balcony and kind of create more livable space for these guys. This sighting, interesting perspective, because I was like, oh yeah, it's quite interesting that the way that they've tucked it aside and tried to give a bigger backyard, which is nice as well. And it kind of poses a question as to like, where's the ownership of the backyard at that point? Like, or do you all just share it together? Which is great if you're sort of know each other as well, but it'd be kind of neat to see an option that would give like a little bit more, like give a little bit of backspace yard to the ADU and a little of the principal dwelling, or find a way to make it shareable, but give those options, because there's always going to be different relationships on the site. I struggled with the balcony. I'm not really sure what the purpose of it is, especially since it's kind of tucked off to the side of the house. It just seems like it could be better used as storage space, because like I go in here and I would think I have no idea where I would put my quiver of backpacks. I'm not sure where that would go. Maybe, you know, I appreciate, because I have been bringing up, I like that there's some access to local materials and construction techniques that people would be familiar with off the bat to just get this thing going. But the ventilated attic, I think, misses an opportunity, because there's so much space up there that you could use for other things. So I might be inclined to kind of suggest, going with something more of like a perfect roof in that situation without board insulation, just to give it more space. And then, yeah, maybe not putting the mechanical in such a celebratory location, but kind of tucking that off into like a nook somewhere else and taking up maybe more of the suggested storage space, if you're going to remove space from the layout in general for that purpose. But I do agree that the way that it's been proposed, like in terms of form and character, it's inoffensive for sure, and it could fit in any neighborhood really in that way, and not a standout way.
Great, thanks so much, Beth. All right, the next one is 209, and maybe we'll go back to John to start us off for this one. This guy right here, or if you need a minute, would either of you like to start out with 209? Nope. Okay. John, go for it.
Sure. Yeah, I did not select this one in our initial shortlist. Interestingly, I thought, yeah, I mean, but I don't know why. I guess I don't want to be offensive here, but it kind of just looked like a double wide to me. But I guess that's good, right? Like it would be pretty quick and easy to put together, fits on the space nicely, a pretty easy use of space in the interior. So I suppose I don't really have a whole lot to say other beyond that. But yeah, for a nice 1 bedroom, works pretty well. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Luke or Beth? Luke.
I'll take the bullet. Yeah, I'm struggling with the detail in the drawings and the consideration that was given to the plan. Given the other submissions had so much thought, and I could see the decision making that had gone into them. I do struggle with this one, like having the 2 entries, like one in the kitchen, and then 2 entries into the bathroom. I see why it's being done for guests, but it doesn't really lend itself to efficiencies, and there's just some elements just feel like they were tacked on there, like the closets. The washer dryer doesn't look like it would fit. There's just a lot of red flags that I'm seeing popping up here. And again, yeah, the lack of detail that's given into like where it could potentially sit on a site. I don't see, other than this site plan that's tucked away at the end, it doesn't even give reference to context for another building. So I would question, given where it is, whether it meets whether it's code compliant. Yeah, I'm sorry. This one's not for me. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Beth.
I agree with the comment about the citing. I found that to be a little bit confusing and difficult to judge. I appreciated that it was a smaller configuration entry. I agree that there's some problematic elements to the way that it's laid out, but I could see somebody who's looking for something very bare bones being okay with a space like this. I appreciate also that the form is quite, like the plan, the form, the envelope is quite standard, with not too much articulation to add additional cost. A little bit when you look at it in the elevations. And agree that maybe that for the scale of the space, the 2 entrances, it's not going to do anything for the energy efficiency, and I don't think it really gives anything to the layout either. But that said, I think, yeah, it is nice to have something that has has consideration for like a smaller typology, if that's all that somebody wants to do. Yeah, that's it. And form wise, if you ignore the cladding, it's fairly simple. So I appreciate that.
Great, thanks. We'll go to online. Charles, would you like to provide some commentary?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm not crazy about this one. I'll just put it this way. I think it's under designed, and there's it's too conventional. There's zero innovation here. It yeah. There's not much that's really commendable here. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, I don't want to be too harsh, about this thing, but it feels kind of like a high school drafting kind of level of design, and there's not enough ambition and real and thought put into this scheme for it to merit kind of consideration.
Okay, thanks, Charles. Sarah, do you want to provide any last commentary on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what everyone said. It wasn't one of my choices, and though the bathroom might work, it's yeah, I mean, just I don't really like the look of it from the outside, and then yeah, inside it's a bit tight. I don't understand. I mean, I other than holding a barbecue, I don't understand what the side deck is all about. So yeah, it wouldn't be one of my first choices. That's all my comments.
Okay, thank you. Next one, 210 is Kingfisher. Just one note. So we're at 3:15 time wise. So I think we're tracking for over 2 hours, but not a long time over 2 hours. So I hope that's okay with everybody. And let's start with another in-person start to the commentary. Luke, would you like to start? Okay, Luke, go for it with Kingfisher Cabin.
Okay, this one I'm struggling with a little bit because I am somewhat conflicted by the pre-reviewed plans, being that I have seen this project elsewhere. I don't recall whether it was a pre-review plans for Penticton or not, or Kelowna, but I guess that is the nature of a pre-review plan, is that it does get bought and moved around everywhere. But I mean, that would be my initial comment, which doesn't have much weight to it. However, when I look through the package, I did see that it wasn't massively appropriated to the site plan. It was sort of, again, the siting, not to be picky, but it was sort of just plonked there. And I would have liked to have seen a little bit more consideration given to the activation of the space around it, because I'm all for this densification, but I believe that it has to be done in the correct way, and we have to use the tools that we have available to us to create these livable spaces, whether it be interior and exterior. But moving on to the design itself, I do appreciate the fact that this building can be rotated and moved, given that it is a pre-review plan. I think it is what they've produced is quite successful in that you can rotate the building, rotate the roof or the building wherever you want, and it reacts to the energy model in that you can still get the light in through that clerestory window. The plan is obviously it's gone through many iterations again. I think it's available elsewhere, but I think it's quite successful and it works well. It seems to be quite efficient to me. I also do appreciate the fact that given that it can go anywhere, that they've also given the option for varying exterior material palettes to let it blend in better to either your own personal style or into a local neighborhood. Yeah, I'll leave it there.
Thanks. Beth, do you want to speak to this one next?
Sure. Yep. I'll speed up this time. I definitely would echo some of the comments. I didn't know that there's a pre-iteration for this package before, but I like the consideration given to switching the cladding. I was okay with the plan for this one. I liked the linearity of the kitchen, the dining, the living, and all in one space. There was consideration given for storage. The bedrooms seem fairly generous. The bathroom, I think, is a bit problematic. It looks really unrealistic to me, a little bit too tight. And I don't recall what I had thought about the wall assemblies for this one. I don't think that I had done too much heavy lifting. Yeah, maybe I'll actually just leave it there for somebody who
Great. Thanks, Beth.
has knowledge of the
John.
wall assembly.
I like this one. I thought it was a cool shape. I like the shape of the roof. I like the clerestory, if that's what that is. I thought the concept, the sort of 9, like the grid matrix concept with the 9 cubes sort of, was a cool organizing framework for it. Similar, Beth, with the bathroom, like they've sort of made the bathroom skinny, and so they've gotten away from their grid in that one case to allow closets in the bedroom. But yeah, it makes the bathroom seem maybe a little bit too tight. But yeah, overall, I thought this one was great. I liked it.
Thanks, John. Sarah, do you want to make some comments on this one? Oh, you're muted at this time. No problem.
Classic. Yeah, initially, I mean, I like the sort of clean look and that there is some flexibility with the roof orientation, the style of cladding that you want on the outside. I thought that was great. You know, they speak about the bathroom being adaptable and universally designed, but it's far too narrow to accommodate that. So not really sure how that would be accomplished. And I also, again, you know, I mean, I think if the design brief is asking for adaptability, then they should have at least shown, you know, what does a ramp look like on this building? And, you know, again, in the context of how is this going to be positioned with another building on the site that's, you, then we can understand that relationship a bit more because, you know, it's going to be a lengthy ramp that is going to have a significant impact on the look of the outside of the building. So, again, I mean, I think if it's an existing design that's been elsewhere, then they should have sorted that out by now and at least included that as the part of the package. So, I mean, it's decent, but from an accessibility standpoint, I don't think that it works.
Thanks, Sarah. Charles.
There's something about this that is really appealing to me. I think there's a real kind of timelessness, I would think, to this design. It feels like it's I don't know that it is, but it feels almost like it's been inspired by some kind of like a traditional layout. I love that the grid idea, the way things are lining up very it's very satisfying from a design point of view. Very well integrated design. There's little issues in the layout, things that that I might be tempted to kind of tweak, but generally speaking, it's nice. I'm kind of wondering though, is the footprint on this is large enough. I don't know how easily or how well this really fits into most backyards. It's almost the size of like a post-war bungalow, right?
Okay, thank you very much, Charles. The last shortlisted entry for the backyard cottage, I'm going to call it a quiet place because I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce the hasn't started in person. Is it in person? Hello. Maybe we'll start online first. Sarah, do you feel like starting us off?
Sure. I actually quite like this one. I think that it's a cool little space. I think that they've done a pretty good job with, trying to incorporate as much sort of storage in there as well, or in storage within the unit as they can. Again, I'm trying to understand what the shower area looks like, whether or not it's kind of a wet room or if it's how that is configured. But there is, it looks like some pretty decent space in there. Hang on, let me just load up a bit. Can't see. A meter. Yeah, it might be a little bit tight, but I mean, I guess that's sort of to be anticipated in these smaller spaces. Yeah, again, I think just sort of understanding, it looks like in this situation that the land is being brought up towards the deck, and that there's only like a couple of steps, but you know, depending on where it's going to be located and how much it needs to be raised for the FCL, then the aesthetic, again, outside, if a ramp needs to be added, is going to be changed dramatically. So it would be nice to sort of understand that a bit more, but otherwise, yeah, I like this this little quiet space.
Thank you, Sarah. Charles.
Yeah, I really like this scheme, and I like to compare it to the previous submission, right? And possibly to the first one as well. As it's an interesting, you know, contrast, right? I think the size of this is the greatest strength of the scheme. It's an incredibly efficient, livable, tiny little space. So I think it fills a niche and is believable as this kind of backyard additional living space. And yeah, just wonderful level to of attention to almost, it's almost a kind of like a mobile home level of compactness and efficiency in terms of the inner spaces. Yes, that poses problems in terms of accessibility inevitably. I don't think it's possible to make that work without expanding the footprint of this thing, because that's how tight it is, and that's unfortunate, you know. But maybe there's room for allowing these things to get built anyway, because they would fulfill a need, and it's believable as well for this scheme to be, again, modularized, flat packed, and delivered, you know, at a really, you know, pretty low cost. And and I'm tempted to suggest, okay, let's take the roof from the previous scheme and put it on top of this, because I don't see the necessity for the weirdness of the form here. I think the layout's fantastic, and you could easily reskin this thing and put a more conventional roof on it and make it even still more, you know, more appealable or appealing or marketable, but really, really strong for this category, this submission.
Great. Thanks, Charles. I just want to note the title is A Quiet Place, and then the next line is A Quiet Space. So is it one or the other or both? It's both. Okay.
It's
Great. Do I
quite
keep mixing it up?
quite a quiet space.
Wait. Okay. Who wants to go next? All right, Beth, go for it.
Okay, I volunteered. I quite like this one, I think, because there's a lot of similar kind of design moves in consideration to the previous one that I liked, the carriage house. I really like seeing some small options. It makes it way more accessible for a lot of people who live here, who just want to do a light touch, but like have that space on their property. I like that the walls are can be prefabricated, tilt up. I like that there's little to no concrete at all. I think in this option, which is great. I don't mind that the form incorporates the roof as well. Although, yeah, I would be sad to see a gutter stapled onto this one. Hopefully, we could find a good rainwater collection strategy to make it practical. I like that the storage is doing dual duty as space partitions, and I love that it's just a quiet, easy square. I mean, I think that means that it could be really cost effective in terms of like unitizing the building materials as well. I think, yeah, there was a little bit of uncertainty around the washroom, but I think it's not unsurpassable. I think that they could come up with a solution there. And it looks, the other thing I like about it is that you could scale costs by tuning the materials you use. So both in the cladding, but also in the finishes in the interior, that could be scaled in terms of cost. Just keep it really simple and kind of adjust your costs based on how you fit it out. Those are my comments.
Great, thank you. Who wants to go next? I see John going for it.
Okay, I really like this one as well. I like this sort of double slope roof. It's like you know, could a low profile look. I think it could fit nicely, unobtrusively into a backyard. You know, like the other one from the same designer, this panelized construction for quick assembly. I really appreciate that in this context. They've shown these really lovely built-in cabinets in the interior, which is a really nice touch for the small space like this. So yeah, I thought this one was a great, nice use of space. And yeah, I thought, you know, just like as the previous one that we looked at suggested with this kind of cube square construction, it could probably be easily rotated, you know, depending on the exposure and so on. So yeah, I thought it was this one was really nice.
Thanks, John. Luke, you can finish us off.
Yeah, I think I support everything that everyone else has said. The size of this one is its asset for sure. It really makes the modular proposal a lot more believable. I agree with John there that I think that well, again, that the size of it allows it to fit quite nicely onto any of these sites. So it really alleviates the qualms I've had with the other proposals where you need to consider the siting really carefully. This one, I think, it is the right response to put it right in the corner, and it can easily be mistaken for a garden shed, which is why I really support what they're doing with the roof and what they're proposing. It just really makes it that bit different and gives it that edge. I also think it provides an opportunity to be able to customize those interiors, and if you wanted to bring the storage up to the ceiling, there are options there. And yeah, I see a lot of flexibility in this. I think it's a really great, simple, but really effective little project.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you, Luke. That's the end of the elevated cottage category. So we're on to the last category, which is the front yard ADU. Just as a little bit of context, this is a bit of an experimental category. It's reflective of the recent changes that we've made to our zoning bylaw, actually adopted yesterday, to create a lot more flexibility in how properties are used, a reduction of front setback, a lot more flexibility on the ADU specific regulations. And, you know, around town, we've got a lot of front yards that, you know, probably won't be redeveloped the entire property. So this category was trying to open up, you know, some consideration of what might happen in there. I think it's a challenging space to try to utilize for an ADU. And interestingly, the number of submissions we got reflected that. We got the fewest submissions in this category, but yeah, a bit of an experiment, and keen to hear what people have to say. So we'll start with 303, the Nook, and maybe we'll start in person for this one. I'll throw it out there. Who wants to say something? Luke, I see Luke moving.
I accidentally made eye contact.
You may accidentally made eye contact. Oh, you gotcha.
Okay, yeah, I agree. I appreciate this is actually a really difficult design parameters for you to give people. I'm just gonna I'm gonna
Yes.
put you on the hot seat there. But okay, yeah, this one it kind of almost gives me CCAN vibes. I wonder if, and I'm sorry, I didn't actually look at this one, so I'm gonna do this on the fly. I wonder if that was part of the proposal. If anyone can speak to that, I'll leave it. No. Okay. Yeah. I mean, I can see how this could be entirely built offsite and then dropped and plonked on. And it's a small piece that sits in your front yard. Seeing this on every house in Squamish could be tricky. I'm not entirely sure how you would roll this out. I don't think there's a lot of flexibility given. I understand why they've gone for the long thin, because again, I feel like this could almost sit on the back of a truck and be delivered. But and again, it's almost its worst enemy in that respect, because you almost want it to be a little wider to be able to have flexibility moving around. But then again, you're backed into a corner with having such little space that I really see why they arrived at this. The plan is tricky. I feel that like there's actually not enough space for to use the living area. I'm not sure whether it's just I'm looking at the dimensions here, and there's about 2 meters. You can maybe get a really small seating piece in here, but I think maybe the floor plan needs to be reconsidered a little bit. And then I guess given the fact that there's not enough space to access the bedroom, aside from the bathroom, it puts the bath in the back, which is difficult for anyone. I suppose it would be for one person living here, and they would use that bathroom, and that's why it's sited in the back.
Yeah, you're probably not having like the in-laws stay with
Yeah.
you if you live here.
I don't know. Matt, why did you make me go first? This is no.
Your eyes, I saw your eyes, and I was like, oh, I see the whites. It's you.
Yeah, I think those points. Yeah, I'm just going to summarize it because I babbled. But yeah, I think it's a good modular design, which could be along the side, which makes it more believable. I think it needs work in the floor plan. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thanks. John?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, I look at this one and from my like land use planning perspective, like I really prefer multiplexes to this. And I get that that's not what we're talking about here, but I'm just like, oh, like the site planning is so challenging when you're trying to do this. But on the other hand, you know, they showed the volumetric, so they showed this in front of a volume of a regular house, and it's like, oh, I don't know, it's kind of cute. I'd say I had a similar response to Luke, just looking at the floor plan and thinking like, I mean, I've lived in some really small spaces, little apartments and bachelor suites a couple of times, and like maybe this would be more successful as like a bachelor without breaking it into 2 rooms. I don't know. That was like one thought that I had. But yeah, otherwise, I don't know. Maybe I had one other little bit of a challenge with this one in that the renderings seem to show, I'm not sure, like the renderings were one looked a bit different than the other. Like one has a flat roof and one seems to have a sloped roof. So I wasn't entirely sure.
I think
Like
there's
that was
2 options, one for a pitched and one for a
it's just
side.
2 options. Oh, that's what that was. Okay.
Yeah.
I see here on 05. So yeah, sure. Yeah, so I think like it's cool. It's neat. I think that just the concept of this is like a design challenge for a tiny front yard living space is cool. Since we can't just proceed directly to multiplexes everywhere, that there's got to be this interim stage, like front yard cottages is a neat idea. So, and I thought this one seemed like fairly simple and straightforward to put together. Probably there's customization, like fairly easy customization on the interior as well. So that's my thoughts.
Thanks, John. Beth?
Am I turned on? Yes. I struggled with this one for sure too. I struggled with the whole concept of it. I think as I get the sense maybe a lot of people do, it's really challenging. I don't, off the bat, I just don't really think anybody solved it in the category. I think it still sort of needs a broader look. There's maybe a few ways I can see it possibly working, but I don't think anybody really nailed it. It has too much permanence, too much weight, too much like a hard construction connecting it to the site. It feels like if we're going to entertain something like this, it needs to kind of like connect a little bit more formally with the houses, and it needs to have a lighter touch on the site. I think something like this would just be more successful as a tiny home parked on a trailer in somebody's driveway or back lane. It just gives it's just too much. Permanence is all I can say about it. Just speaking to it because it is, the submission we're speaking to for what it is. I don't have any comments about the layout. I think that it's done kind of compact and with the best that can be done with it. But, having a big anchor stair and stuff like that, it's just too much. It's just not an innovative solution. It's too much like just a micro house put on the lot. So I tend to agree with John in terms of, what's the lesser of the evils.
Thank you. Online, Charles, do you want to go?
Sure. Yeah, I'm gonna follow along with everyone else here, and I'm gonna comment first on the problem with the category. I think that the submissions illustrate how the concept for this kind of front yard infill um, doesn't work as it's currently formulated. And I think this is a category where a more open kind of idea is more thinking outside of let's call it thinking outside the setbacks approach would have been more interesting, is how do we take existing housing stock with unnecessarily large front yard setbacks and create some density by infilling that area. I think it would require some really, very different thinking. All of these submissions clearly were trying to fit something within some big constraints in terms of setbacks and distances from the existing house that basically relegated, as Beth was saying, to, sticking a tiny home on the front yard. And none of these are particularly good even from that point of view. I filled out the form. I only filled 3 and left the 4th one blank because some of these submissions were that bad. But I don't think any of these really work. I think this one's maybe the second best in the category. Yeah.
And Sarah.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's tricky trying to fit something in front of a house, and it not to feel like it's kind of out of place. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the challenges with such a small space. Obviously, trying to make it accessible is near impossibility. Having said that, again, they could have spoken about adding some backing the walls for future grab bars. Because of the small size of this, maybe it would fit in front of a home, but it does, it reminds me either of like a trailer or a container. And yeah, I mean, it's none of them, as Charles said, are fantastic. That's all my comments.
No problem.
That container idea actually is great. I wish one of these submissions had been just a container.
I agree with that.
Okay. Moving forward, the next one is the Little Peak, which is 304. Who wants to go first? Okay, John. take it
Sure,
away.
I will. I kind of like this one. It's cute. I think maybe the color and the hand-drawn images really appeal to me. So that's maybe my bias, but I thought it was cute. The loft helps, I suppose, but then there's a lot of interior space taken up with stairs. So like, I don't know. It would have been nice if it could be just on a slab at grade instead of having needing, the entry stairs. I think I have a friend who has a very similar, something to like very much like this in his backyard, not in the front yard, in the backyard. And like it works pretty well as a, micro living space with the loft and a little kitchen living space downstairs. So I don't know. I guess I kind of thought the colors and the drawings were cute and it was appealing to me. The loft is great, but then like this trade-off with interior stairs is a bit challenging in such a tiny little spot. Like you'd maybe like retrofit it after and put a ladder in like after the building inspector's been through or something instead of having the stairs. I don't know.
Okay, thanks, John. Beth? Oh, Luke or Luke?
Oh, you okay?
Luke making a move for the, no, Beth, okay.
Formally, I feel like this one is almost the closest to something that could be okay and tie in. Oh. I want to kind of rotate it so it picks up on the fall line of the roof, like the angle of the roof, and kind of just continue the form of the house and just wrap it down. If you can imagine, just sort of rotating it, maybe making it a little bit lower if that's at all possible. Probably not because of the floodplain restrictions. That formally, that might kind of make it feel like it ties in a little bit better with kind of the typical roof line, but roof lines are going to vary. It's really hard to do. I can see this working really well in a backyard. And I think, again, my comment about maybe not doing such a massive connection to the earth, but like pilotis, or maybe like a wood kind of foundation, something a little bit of a lighter touch.
Excellent. Thank you. Luke.
Yeah, I think out of this category, this to me actually was the most successful one. Yeah, we're skirting a little boundary here that these are really on the edge of tiny homes, and they ultimately are. And what I'm actually quite interested in is that no one proposed to go with a light foundation. And Beth, you're really on point with that. Like I think a lot of the problem with all of these is the ground, the way they touch the ground is so heavy, but they're so small and delicate that there's some kind of like juxtaposition there that's not actually it working in in the favor of this. That being said, I think this one actually is the reason I feel like it's the most successful one is that yeah, the roof line peeling up and coming down speaks to the existing 2-story home. It brings it down to more of a 1-story human scale as you come around the entrance. Ultimately, yes, the sighting of it blocks the views from the front of the house, but that's really unavoidable. And I think that the attention that's being given into the plan, it's speaking tiny home, and I do believe that, like, yeah, the stairs, John, like it takes up more room, but I think they've considered a winder stair, and they've looked at different ways to provide a folding bed and folding tables, and understanding there is a small space. I think it's actually the most successful one. And again, just to go back to the original point, another issue I think is that the FCL is like 1 meter, and there's a really hard design parameter to make this small scale of building work with that disconnection from the ground plane.
Yeah. Thank you, Luke. Online, Sarah, do you want to provide some commentary?
Sure. Let me just open this up here. This is 304. Yeah, I mean, I'm not, I don't love this, but I don't love any of them. So I mean, that's a part of it. I find that, I think for the people living in the main house, looking at a big blank wall is going to be depressing for them. I think that the loft does make the space a little bit more livable. But I agree. It just, again, because of the height with the FCL is, I think, yeah, makes it a bit tricky for it to feel like it's nestled in rather than it sort of plunked on top of a platform. Yeah, I mean, that's my comments. Thanks.
Thanks, Sarah. Charles.
Yeah, this was my favorite in this group, I mean, this truly is just a tiny home. It belongs on on a set of wheels, and I'm almost picturing very large kind of carriage wheels and a yoke so that you could pull it with a draw horse kind of thing. But it's a cute little house, but again, it's hard to sight. Like even on this drawing here, it looks very awkward in front of the house like that. I could see building a whole neighborhood of them though, instead of putting them in front yards. That might be interesting. It'd be, that would be affordable for sure, right? So I was talking earlier about the problems with the category and some of the innovations that might have been considered is what if you take something like this thing, but you do set it up on stilts and you set it up high enough so that you can actually build it over top of the driveway? You know, because that would lend itself, I think, to, you know, not interfering with the house as much. Yeah, yeah,
Or tuck
But,
it into the carport,
yeah, or tuck it into the carport, sure.
shipping container in the carport.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Thank you, Charles. Next is 3. Oh, come here. Why is that not going? 306. Charles, do you want to start us off with this one?
Sure, why not? Interestingly enough, compared to its counterpart in the first category, this one's kind of okay. I mean, there's still an awful lot of rock stack there, but it's believable as this kind of little modular kind of shack. Um, um, yeah, I mean, it has all the same problems that we've been discussing here on just being too small, too tight, and awkward, you know, sitting in front of the house the way it is. Yeah.
All right. Sarah, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I do agree that it's too much rock. Having said that, I do appreciate the screening of the ramp. I think that that's quite successful. They have managed to get the space requirements for an adaptable bathroom, so that too is successful to me. I think for me, because of those accessible features, I think that this one um, yeah, would be, you know, the most accessible of any of those front units. And I don't mind it, but again, like we sort of have the hint of volumes behind, but not, you know, really how it, you know, in terms of its height in front of what exists. So it's hard to tell exactly how obtrusive this would be. Um, yeah, otherwise, I mean, I think that, you know, talking about local materials and such with the panels is, you know, is a relatively good approach. But again, it's just it's a bit odd going in the front yards. Would be, you know, more suited in the backyard, I think.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. In person, Beth?
I agree with Sarah for sure. I really liked how the ramp was integrated in this approach, materials aside. I thought that was great. I don't think it needs the roof overhang. Like, I think you want to, in an approach like this, you want to minimize the impact on the house behind as much as possible. So might take an approach like of Little Peak, or maybe the quiet space and its roof consideration. And yeah, I was kind of, I didn't think the interior layout was not too bad either, and definitely appreciate that they were able to make things adaptable. Yeah, so that's it for me.
Oh, thanks. Luke?
Yeah, I appreciate this person's commitment to their rock stack. But I do think, I think this version is the most successful. Yeah, screening the things. And Beth, you stole my comment. I always agree with you with the overhangs. I think it's the overhangs and the beams. They're not the place for this, given how close in the proximity is to the front building. However, I understand why they might be, the designer would have been apprehensive to remove them, given that it's just a box afterwards. So a little bit like a little harsh going saying that. I don't think corrugated metal is the right choice in this either, because again, it just looks like a sea can. I think there needs to be more of a sensitive softening and use of color in these small buildings to give them a bit more playfulness. The floor plan, yeah, it's like a standard sort of studio layout. I would have maybe tried to locate the door more in the center of the plan to make it more efficient and really remove the circulation space or make use out of it. Yeah, that were my comments.
Thanks, John.
I agree with what everybody else said. My maybe only unique thing to add is the way they've got the entry, the front door around the side there with the door to the washroom. That's like a really tight little corner and maybe a bit of a hard way to get into the building. When you imagine like shoes and jackets and other things. I think it's a bachelor kind of style layout. So, I think you're saving kind of being able to efficiently use the space, the living room where it's with fewer interior walls.
Great, thanks. We have made it in good time to our final submission, which is 308. Who wants to go first for the last one? Nobody's looking at me. They know that's the. Oh, you looked at me.
I'll go.
That's Luke then.
Yeah, I find this one a little tricky, given that like it's when looking at the visual that they've given and the spaces, it's by far probably the better of the spaces. However, it's kind of unfair to compare them because everyone else has gone for a really small, tiny home strategy, and this one is so large that my concern is whether it would even fit in the front yard of most places. The one thing that really is unclear is the distance between the dwelling unit and the principal dwelling. So I have a little bit of concern as to whether or not that would be achievable without non-combustible construction. That aside, the fact they've gone for they extruded the whole plan up 2 stories and gone that close to the principal dwelling, again, I'm not sure whether you could even use the actual design given its proximity and the spatial separation that will be required. There'll be limiting distance issues. No windows would be allowed, and I don't know how that would work with the existing building. The plan itself, however, might work quite well for a rear category. I wonder if they accidentally. No, it's the site definitely shown on the site plan. Yeah. So that will be like a really critical concern of that one. Otherwise, the design itself is relatively, aesthetically pleasing. And the actual layout of the space is relatively successful. Yeah, I'll leave my points to that one.
Thank you, Luke. John, do you want to go next?
I guess it would have been nice to have it shown in context. The one rendering here it's kind of on its own without any other buildings around it. And my kind of just at first glance, that big front wall beside the entry stairs is just a big blank wall. And if you imagine that, I guess that's not what you see from the street, but it's just sort of a pretty blank wall. It would be nice to break it up with something. The layout seems okay. It's super tight. I'm just like, I was looking at as you walk up the stairs. I mean, they packed everything in there, the laundry, mechanical, and bathroom. I don't know how that works. It looked a bit tight to me, but like it's cool if it could fit. It seems like a nice living space overall in general.
Thank you, John. Beth?
I think that it's too bad they didn't provide an elevation. Not on? Oh, thanks. I think it's too bad that they didn't provide an elevation for this one, actually, because I think it could have been one of the more appropriate kind of, maybe it's okay in elevation. I'd like to see how it relates to the house behind it. It almost mimics a facade, like a portion of the house, like a mask. But I see it as a big blank wall that faces the house, and it has to be. So that's really a challenge that would be tough for these guys to overcome, of course. And I don't know what the adaptability requirements were for this category, but it just seems really like a very hard space to make it accessible to all, to make it an appropriate place that's accessible, adaptable, and appropriate for aging in place. Feels really tricky. That's it for me.
Thank you. Charles?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see how this scheme you know, really responds, answers the challenges and the questions posed by this, very experimental sort of move from an urban planning point of view, right? It's um, it's just a very compact 2-story home. It's not particularly good from an architectural point of view. Very little here kind of like lines up, and it's poorly detailed, at least the way that it's illustrated and rendered. It's kind of like a narrow version of a Vancouver special, I guess. And they're proposing sitting it kind of sideways with the side of the house facing the street, but there's very little kind of work on making that elevation attractive. I think overall there's just it's pretty awful. I mean, I don't think that I think this would be an example of what we wouldn't simply not allow as a solution to front yard infill, right?
Thank you, Charles. And for the final word, Sarah.
I agree, Charles. I think that looking at this building sideways, and not understanding how it relates to the houses behind, it would be better suited to be in a backyard, but it's not that imaginative. And then it's quite interesting what they say about accessibility and your universal design, and saying that revisions can be made to replace the entry stairs with a ramp. Well, it's going to be like a 40-foot ramp, and increase the door and hallway widths. Okay, so what does that do to the rest of the space? Increase the stair width to allow for a chairlift. Well, chairlift works, but not if you're in a wheelchair, because you need to have multiple wheelchairs on each floor. So yeah, I think that this one is a bit of a fail for a front yard. Yeah, that's it.
All right. Thank you. Okay. And I'll say thank you to everyone for your time reviewing these designs. The next steps for ADP members, we'd ask that by Monday, you email the form back to us that was included as a link off the agenda item, but I will send it out to you today. So that's our hope, that we can get those in the very near term. And then a week from now, I would like to email the winners that they've won. The announcement to the community will actually be delayed slightly. We just got a bit of a gap in coverage from our communications team. So the second week of July, we'll make that announcement to everyone and do some of the promotion that we had outlined in the design brief. So yeah, thank you very much. The last thing I wanted to take a minute to talk about is that we intend to run another design contest based on the R1 multiplex new zoning. And we've got, again, some money for prize, actually a fair bit more money for the prize money for the categories. And yeah, I guess one thing I'd like to do is ask the ADP members who have been involved in this one if they have any comments or thoughts on what we should consider as we put that design brief together for the contest. I probably won't take your time right now, but I'll send out an email and ask if you have any thoughts that you could submit via email to us in terms of putting that contest together, in terms of both the contest, the design brief, and how we run it. So if you have thoughts on things that could be done better, let us know as we move into that contest.
May I, Matt? Is there just one winner per category? Is that the
in the
for what we've just reviewed?
the ADU? No, there's we'll choose 3. There's
Okay.
prize money for first, second, and third place.
Okay.
And all three become pre-reviewed. And then, Carly, what did you just mention? Oh yes, good point. Yeah, we'd like to launch the multiplex contest right at the start of fall, and conclude it with an ADP meeting in December with some type of similar format. So if you have thoughts on how we could improve this, the use of ADP at the end of the process for judging, I'm all ears on that too. So that's it from my end. I'll hand it back to our chair.
Thanks, Matt. Are there any items today for roundtable discussion? No? Okay. Well, I just motion to end the meeting. John, seconded by Sarah. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody.